I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Hello everyone!
Everybody, and welcome back to our biased reactions on the Advanced Player's Guide. Today we're going to be talking about the spells in the Advanced Player's Guide and reacting to them in a biased fashion.
That's right. And we can't start reacting to the spells chapter without starting at the beginning, where we have got Faya and Daji, and Faya is spewing out, vomiting a swarm of insects into a hag, and the hag is like, "Come on! I already surrendered. My hands are up. Ah, what are you doing? You're vomiting insects on me."
Come on, the hag deserved it.
I know, she's probably actually menacing them, but her hands do look like they're like kind of stop vomiting insects.
Oh yeah, stop bugging me, says chat. Stop bugging me.
Yep,
Very
yep.
appropriate.
And then with a cauldron that she's like kind of abandoned in order to do that, and like a very upset tree.
The tree is not amused.
It's not. And you can see in the spell's intro that it not only talks about like what's in the chapter, but it's got some cool stuff that is in there. It's got like a quick guide about a reminder of preparing your spells and casting your spells and refocusing, but they also have some ideas about those. So like, what exactly are you doing when you're preparing your spells? What about when you're casting your spells? How do they come out? Do your verbal components use your own voice or resonate in a different timbre due to the magic in your words, or resemble the voice of your deity? What is it like to refocus? And then a sidebar about spell components, so that you have to think about verbal, somatic, and material components. So it's got a lot of kind of interesting, useful things to think about when you're casting and preparing spells that you might not expect from a spell's introduction in the Advanced Player's Guide to have, but they are here. So this is where you should go for that.
Sounds good.
Unless Secrets of Magic has even more of that kind of stuff, then you can go anywhere.
I mean, I figure Secrets of Magic probably will. Having not seen it, it just seems likely, but...
Then you can go anywhere.
Anywhere. All right.
After that, there are wonderful spell lists. As you can see in these spell lists, they are not exactly a full page for any given tradition. Even the tradition that is greedy and gluttonous, and all of the other sins, as the Thessalonians put it, and demands all of the spells, Arcane got merely almost 2 columns worth in a 3-column format, whereas as you can see, Divine got about 1 column. Occult got, well, almost as much as Arcane this time.
Mm-hmm.
It got some more, and then Primal got a little less.
I just saw a gift sub coming through. Thanks for the gift sub, Elftero.
Absolutely, thanks. And so those are what we're going to be looking for. So keep an eye out, and when you see the divine spells, you'll know that's one of those divine spells that there aren't as many of in the Advanced Player's Guide.
So let's see what we've got going on here for the actual spells.
All right.
So one of the first things to catch my eye here is the second one on this page here with all of its different heightenings. Animate Dead.
Necromancy and creates a summoned undead. It's actually not evil because it's a temporary construct filled with negative energy, so it's not fully creating necromantic life, and the necromancy is designed to eat it up and kind of devour and destroy it at the end of the duration anyway, which... So the amount that you're pushing against the nature of negative energy is very limited when it's sustained up to 1 minute, and then the negative energy gets to destroy it at the end.
But still, I know this is something that people really wanted to have in the game. The ability to command to create and command their own undead.
You're saying people didn't want an agonizing despair that lets you make someone so despaired that they take mental damage and become frightened?
I mean, that's certainly powerful and useful, but I think Animate Dead thematically was a niche that I definitely saw people asking for online when the core rulebook came out.
What about Animate Rope? That might be a really important niche.
Well, it certainly has a lot of utility to it.
I think all of the people who really were upset that use rope was no longer a skill in Pathfinder also are probably really focused on animate rope.
But it's pretty useful, particularly when you're looking at needing to, whenever you're looking at needing to climb somewhere, or if you want
bind
to
something
restrict
up.
something's movement, or...
Yep, you can make knots crawl around. There's all sorts of things that this rope can do. It can do up to 7 things, one of which is undoing. Then there's animated assault, where you just basically grab a bunch of unattended objects and throw them.
So this is kind of like a telekinetic attack.
It's like a telekinetic poltergeist situation.
Yeah, except you're the poltergeist.
Yes.
It's got some solid range on it.
You're the poltergeist, Linda.
Okay, fair enough.
You're the poltergeist.
It's got some good range on it, too. You can sustain it for up to a minute.
Yep. And it does, like, a fair amount of initial damage. Plus can be sustained for additional damage. And obviously, the additional damage is not as much as a flaming sphere, because it is a larger area than a flaming sphere and had initial damage, and B is in the same non-movable 10-foot burst, so people can realize this is not a burst I want to stay in, because it keeps taking a huge amount of additional damage over time. So there is some mitigating factors to it, but if there's a reason that they can't leave it, you can actually pile on the hurt and do a total of 12d10 to them with the 2nd level spell. So, I mean, it's a very weird situation if the fight went on for a minute and they didn't leave that 10-foot burst
and they were still alive.
And they were still alive when you were using that level 2 spell, but it could be. Speaking of things that can stay for a while and have some similarities to a flaming sphere is Aqueous Orb. You push that around and trap people inside of the orb, and they can swim out with a really, really easy swim, but it still wastes their turn. And if they critically fail the reflex save, they can't swim out. They actually have to use the escape action, which is a massive pain for them, because that has a multiple attack penalty built in, because it has the attack trait.
Yes.
And yeah, you just keep rolling the Aqueous Orb around and trying to pick up creatures into the Aqueous Orb.
And it can try to counteract any magical fires it moves through as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's made of water.
Yeah.
It does that, and if it's a creature with weakness to
of
water, you can deal damage to them.
And speaking of flaming spheres, magical fire.
Yeah. Aqueous Orb wins, because Flaming Sphere does not say it can counteract any Aqueous Orbs.
That's true.
Alright, so Bestial Curse is where you turn someone into a beast. A beast. Until the time when the last rose petal falls, but actually there's no way to get out of it. They just turn into a beast, and it could be unlimited duration.
If they critically fail, yeah.
Yep, and when that happens, they become clumsy and gain weakness to silver, but they do gain a claw, hoof, horn, or jaws attack based on what you want them to do. So there's that. But they're bad at manipulating, because they're kind of a beast, and they may have like hooves on their hands.
Legit.
Plus, maybe their castle becomes like really weird looking, and everyone turns into animated objects. But that's not part of the spell. You probably need a ritual for that.
Probably, yeah. What about Blanket of Stars? That sounds Desmond.
Well, Blanket of Stars is a 6th level spell that makes you really, really good at stealth checks for 10 minutes, and also in a Starry Night Sky, you're invisible every time you stand still. And even if you're moving in that case, you are concealed, because you look like a Starry Night Sky. Plus, creatures that end their turn adjacent to you and are looking at the stars that are in your Starry Night Sky can become dazzled, or possibly even confused, every turn. So, that's fun. The thing is, the confusion is admittedly only 1 round at max, and if they get hit, they can get kicked out of it, but it doesn't have an incapacitation, so...
Yeah, so you don't have to worry about the level difference.
And you can re-confuse them if they keep critically failing on multiple turns. So Blinding Fury is actually a reaction, which is very slick, and it's a reaction to a creature damages you, which is basically like... a lot. It's basically like a freebie, because
it also has
that's
a range
happen.
of 60 feet, so like they don't have to be damaging you from adjacent.
Yep.
Or even close.
Yep. And what happens is that they get you, but then after that, you give them your outrage, which makes it so that they become blinded by their fury and can't see you for a little while, unless they critically succeed, which makes it harder for them to hit you again. And on a failure, it lasts for a minute, but it still only means during that minute that each time they hit you, they lose you until the end of their turn. And then when their turn ends, they can see you.
And then if they critically fail, it's just an unlimited duration. Just the first time each round they damage a creature.
Any creature, not just you.
Any creature at all, then they can't perceive.
So they can never do follow-up attacks.
Yeah.
Or they can, but they have like a 50% miss chance on it. So that's pretty handy. It is incapacitation because of the fact that that's pretty incapacitating. Even though it doesn't fully take them out of the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so Blister... you point at a target and it grows blisters, and then you can pop the blisters with later actions that do massive acid damage in a 15-foot cone. It's not that massive for a 5th level spell, but when you consider that there might be multiple blisters and you can pop them all, then it can become pretty massive.
And powerful. Yep.
Blister. Sarian points out it was a reaction stream to a reaction spells.
That's true.
Speaking of Blister, Blistering Invective, a favorite from Pathfinder 1st Edition, where you basically diss someone so bad that they get lit on fire.
I love this spell.
It's one of Occult's few, fire spells. And, yeah, it does persistent fire damage to a creature. And, they can also become frightened because it's like, oh my gosh. And as you heighten it, you target more and more creatures and do more and more damage as well. Until eventually, if you really wanted to cast it as a 10th level spell, you could do 10d6 damage every round to a total of 9 creatures.
Mm-hmm.
While also frightening them. That's like a 5th level fireball every round. Which is like, at that level, it's like, okay, fine, I take a 5th level fireball every round, but it's still a lot.
Sick burn the spell. Yeah.
Yep. Elftro says it scales so much better than Pathfinder 1st Edition. Yep. So Blood Vendetta is a 2nd level reaction as well. And it causes persistent bleed damage to somebody who dares to deal persistent bleed damage to you. And so that's one that is like a little bit less, obviously you can always cast it than Blinding Fury, because you do have to wait until someone deals persistent bleed damage to you. But if you do, it's really nice, because they're going to take their own persistent bleed damage. And not only that, they might gain a weakness to piercing and slashing, and that's only one every time, but it adds up over time if your party has that.
And it scales up to give you even more persistent bleed damage.
It's got 2d6 at level 2, and every 2 levels it adds 2d6 more. So, that's pretty handy.
How about Chameleon Coat, which gives a large group a massive status bonus to stealth checks to hide?
It does. And it's 8 creatures for 10 minutes, and it's a +3 to stealth checks to hide that shifts to match the environment. And if any piece of gear or clothing affected is removed, the spell ends for a creature.
But only for that creature.
Yeah, it's very, very good. And at level 6... if you roll a critical failure on your stealth check to sneak within 30 feet of a creature that would spot you, you only fail, as the spell mildly hypnotizes them. Which means that they don't quite get a full glimpse of you, but they do know exactly where you are. And at the 8th level version, the status bonus is massiver still.
Yes, +4.
Yep. It's so much stealth.
The highest of all bonuses.
It's so much stealth. Charitable Urge is even more dangerous than these uncharitable and sinful things, because you make someone believe in charity, and they give away their possessions. Even if they succeed, they are stunned as they wrestle with the urge to give away their possessions. The good news is, if they really, really don't have anything in their entire possession that is, not mission critical for them, they can choose to be stunned 1 instead of giving up the item. There's also Chilling Spray, which is, I believe, a pickup from Gods and Magic. I guess we'll see in Gods and Magic, but does some cold damage and lowers people's speeds. Chroma Leech drains the color out of anything. And, someone pointed out that actually Blood Vendetta works for piercing, slashing, or persistent bleed damage. That's right.
So that's much easier to use.
I was scanning it too quickly. You can use it a lot of the time.
Requirements,
like
you can bleed.
Yes, you have to be able to bleed.
It's a funny requirement line, but it makes sense.
Chroma Leech, you take all the color out of a target.
There's a comment here, too, that Chilling Spray is also great for cocktails.
It is. It's very useful for cocktails. I would have used that to make my my martini when I was my summoner was absolutely annihilating the champion in that summoning arena match.
Yeah.
Council of Thieves, except for I didn't have it, so I couldn't.
There you go.
Couldn't make a martini with it. Let's see. Chroma Leech gives an enfeebled condition that could also make them be filled with listlessness and ennui. And when they have that ennui, they're like, oh, I don't really want to make a move action. And they have to make a save to make a move action. And they could have even be drained and enfeebled permanently on a critical failure. Gnomes take a -2 circumstance penalty.
Yes, as Joe said, to Chroma Leech, the stuff that gnome nightmares are made of.
Yep. Countless Eyes gives you eyes everywhere. Or another target, and then they can't be flanked because there's so many eyes, and when they seek,
they seek similar to what happens with the Robe of Countless Eyes?
You mean the Robe of Eyes?
Yes, the Robe of Eyes.
What about the Eye of Robes?
The Eye of Robes art is horrifying.
The Eye of Robes art is horrifying?
Yes.
But it's the Eye of Robes, Linda.
Yeah, but there's like all these robes coming out of the eyes. Anyway.
What about a cozy cabin?
That's much less horrifying. I like cozy cabin.
It's very cozy, and it's also a cabin. It's a 3rd level spell, and you get like a little cabin. And it's pretty basic, but now you're in a cabin. That's what it does. Crashing Waves is a 3rd level spell that makes a wave and deals bludgeoning damage in a 30-foot cone. It extinguishes non-magical fires. Another good one against things weak against water. Curse of Lost Time is, I guess...
Aging Curse.
I guess what Proust was looking for in Search of Lost Time, also known as Remembrance of Things Past, but it is an aging curse. Artifacts and some other things are not going to be affected by it, but it can deal some damage to objects or constructs.
Causing them to rust or degrade over time. Living creatures can be briefly aged.
And become clumsy and enfeebled. Potentially unlimited duration. It's the Curse of Lost Time. Yossarian asks, do you need some of the element nearby for anything with an element trait like water? Well, the element traits at the back say that they either manipulate or like bring forth or evoke those kind of elements. So generally you wouldn't unless it says in the spell. And evocation particularly often like evokes that element straight off. If it says it in the spell, and also it might be like a transmutation if it alters like currently existing elements that are there, then you do need it. And if it doesn't say that you need it in the spell, then you don't, basically. Deja Vu, you loop a thought process in a target's mind and like kind of make them repeat the actions that they took. So they make a will save. If they fail, then they get to take actions on their next turn, but whatever they do, they're gonna have to do it again.
So attacking the same creature that they attacked before.
Yep. And it's only a 1st level spell. Dismantle is a 2nd level spell where you touch an object and it disassembles itself into component parts, which it gains a broken condition, but you can kind of hide it around, and then when it ends, it reassembles, so it's easier to smuggle something around. It can potentially last a long time if you have the
Seems like something that'd be popular with the Aspis Consortium.
Yeah, the Aspis love doing that kind of thing. Dull ambition is where you like weaken somebody's ambition in life, and they just don't care. They're not paying attention, and they're awful at initiative. It's just a curse. So even on a success for 1 hour, they roll twice and use the lower on initiative. Mm-hmm. A failure, that's a day, and also
affects
their downtime for their job. it's just, you have really bad job satisfaction and you're burning out. Critical failure is unlimited. Deja vu, you loop the thought process of a target's mind and force it to repeat the same actions again. So basically, they once you affect them, they can take whatever actions they want on the next round, but then they're going to have to repeat that again on the following round.
So, for example, if they attacked a creature, they would have to attack that same creature again on the next round.
It does have a 100-foot range, and it's only a first-level spell. So, Enervation, you kind of extend your finger and fire a negative energy beam that deals persistent negative damage and potentially drains and dooms the opponents. David Nielsen says, I'm imagining Deja Vu going badly. So, gonna beat you into the ground again?
Yeah, like, oh no, I don't want them attacking me again.
Yes,
good news.
But, the problem, even with that is you beat down somebody and then they just like, oh, okay, I'll spend my next turn moving away. And then the boss has to spend their entire turn moving after them to beat them down.
Yes.
And it winds up actually making them lose the turn after the next turn because, for the cost of the Deja Vu and one of your people who got beat down running away while everybody else on your team attacks the boss. So even then, which is not like the greatest situation for you, you can make that into an advantage. It's a very tactical spell. Enervation is just cool, getting a lot of persistent negative damage and some conditions like Drained and Doomed. Drained is nice because it just scales automatically with a creature's level. The stronger they are, the more hit points they lose. Familiar's Face lets you use your familiar or animal companion as a scrying sensor to see what it sees and smell what it smells and use its other senses too. Your Siren's like, just persistent negative energy damage is nasty. Yeah, no, it is. Sure. It is. And when you add Drained and Doomed, it's even nastier. I mean, a lot of opponents don't actually use the PC dying rule, so maybe the Doomed isn't as bad for them. But the ones that do, they're not going to like being doomed. It's not good. Speaking of spells that somebody's not going to like, in this case, maybe your animal companion or familiar. Hopefully not, unless you're super evil. Final Sacrifice.
Yeah.
It's basically a fireball that's one level lower and blows up your minion. Like, it does the full damage of a third level fireball at second level. It's so on lists that don't have Fireball.
Yeah. So hopefully if you're doing this, you're doing it to a summoned creature.
Even then, if it's not mindless, it has the evil trait.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh, I've summoned in a Zada. Hi, Zada. Zada's like, hi, friend. I'm going to blow you up. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always do fire damage. If you literally summon like a cold or water creature, it does cold damage because it just doesn't make sense that your water elemental explodes in fire. You can't do it on something that you temporarily seize control of and turn it to a minion as a like, oh, well, I have control of you for one round, so I'm gonna automatically kill you.
Trying to do that breaks the controlling effect, which is not something that a PC would deliberately do, knowing the effects of their spell, but it could be pretty funny to have an NPC do that as a show of their arrogance.
Yeah. Elftro points out that the minimum effort you can put into casting a spell that lasts pretty long is Unseen Servant. And it's mindless, so that is a useful combo with Final Sacrifice.
Oh, legit.
Force Cage, as shown in the art, makes a cage. The cage is made of force.
What?
Yes, and there are bars in the force, and basically it's gonna take a fair amount of beating to get through the cage, but until they do, like, you can shoot through the bars, and so can whoever's in the cage, but they can't really get out of the bars unless they are very, very tiny.
So, very useful for opponents that prefer to attack in melee, because I have bad news for melee attacks.
Mm-hmm. So, let's see. Fungal Infestation. Toxic spores swarm over creatures in the area, causing them to erupt in grotesque fungal growths. It deals persistent poison damage. The fungi can give them weakness to fire and slashing.
Which is and all of that is increased if they critically fail.
Oh yeah, and it can scale up. Like, if you're just so much like, I want the best fungal infestation ever known in a 15-foot cone. You could do 10d6 persistent poison damage with a potentially on a critical failure 20d6 persistent poison damage, which is a 10th level fireball, every round, and 10 weakness to fire and slashing, so it's just adding 10 damage to everyone's attack. That does involve using your 10th level spell on Focus Infestation and them critically failing.
But it's hypothetically possible.
It's hypothetically possible to do it. Alright, Ghostly Tragedy is the only spell where you think, there was a horrible tragedy that happened to someone. Let's have ghosts do that to me. And say, that sounds like a good idea. Then you have Ghostly Tragedy. So what happens is, you spend 10 minutes and 9 minutes are reenacting the horrible tragedy that happened with you as the person who the tragedy happened to, and ghosts as the people who did the things. This causes you to take negative damage, but it depends on how many creatures were involved in the scene. And you don't know how many creatures were involved in the scene.
So you better hope that this wasn't an event that involved a mob, otherwise
you're actually dead.
Yes.
Because, yes, you might be. You might be dead because
any creature that observed the recreation, including you,
an attempt tries to investigate the event to discover new clues and information. They're very, like, kind of they're indeterminate spirits, so it's not like, oh, this spirit looks just like Lord Evilsworth. He must have been the one who killed this victim. But you can figure out, like, kind of roughly what a lot of the people in the scene did. And yeah, just hope it's not a mob because you're dead. Yep. There doesn't appear to be a limit to the number of ghostly apparitions that show up. So, yeah, it's risky, but it can give you really, really good information. Grisly growths. It does not cause grizzly bears to grow. Instead, it deals 10d6 piercing damage as new features emerge from them. Like, fingers and eyes and legs. And it's very grisly, and they rapidly fall and rot away after one round. And, let's see, it looks like that there's will saves that people have to attempt, or they become sickened. So that also happens, just, they become sickened.
To the damage,
Not you, them, and you. You, the person who's getting it, and also anyone within 30 feet. It's like, oh my gosh, what is even happening, body horror?
So, yeah, I mean, but it makes a lot of sense that the book where the witch comes out has some more of these, like, creepy, cursey themed body horror spells.
David wonders, can you get healed during Ghostly Tragedy? You can get healed during it, but all the damage happens at the same time at the end. So it won't save you if there were like, oh yeah, there were 100 creatures involved. You take 200d6. The GM can be like, well, we can do it all together, and you take 700 and die from the massive damage rules. Or we can do it separately, and like maybe you have resistance negative damage, and you do it separately and you survive. I don't know. But if you don't, it's like, okay, we'll do it separately. We ping you until you're 0, and then you immediately get hit 4 times and die.
Yes.
Oh, you had a hero point? Okay, you immediately get hit 7 times and die. So it could be bad. Probably that's not going to happen because it'll be obvious if a mob was involved and you won't cast Ghostly Tragedy.
Yes.
You'll see a stampede of things. It's like we casted on Mufasa and all of the wildebeest trampled us too.
Spoilers.
But we knew that. We knew that was going to happen. Spoilers for The Lion King, sorry. It's been a long time. Read Hamlet.
Yeah.
Spoilers for Hamlet. Alright. Heat metal. That makes metal hot, causing persistent fire damage.
Which isn't great if you're holding or wearing the metal.
Yeah, I mean, you can release it and take less fire damage if you want, or you can just take the fire damage. It's up to you. Ice Storm makes a storm of ice with bludgeoning and cold damage, and it honestly does a huge amount of stuff, but it's ridiculously small. It's bludgeoning damage and cold damage and difficult terrain and concealment. And you can get 2 of them if you cast them outside. And it deals more damage each turn, but it's ridiculously small.
So this is basically like the Eeyore Cloud of Death?
It kind of is, but it's ridiculously small. So,
well, yeah, the Eeyore Cloud is just like the cloud.
But it does a ridiculous amount of things at level 4, because, like, even if you're talking about like solid fog, much larger area. It only does like less than half of the things that this does, and it's the same level. So yeah, it's still hard to use it because it's ridiculously small. Ill Omen is another pickup from Gods and Magic, I believe. It is a spell that will make someone have
Speaking
bad
of
luck.
witchy spells.
Yes. If they fail their will save, they get bad luck on another check. So yes, you have to make them fail save here, even though you're going to make them fail another save, but the idea is you only are risking a first level spell for this.
I see from Yosariad in chat a suggestion of how to use heat metal in a far less violent way. To have a metal cup of cold coffee and then use it to heat your
There's
coffee.
A lot of good utility uses of this.
I mean, if you're super high level, that would be a cool character idea. A character who just like profligately uses low level spells to handle basic life tasks because they only care about the high levels for their battle.
So Impaling Spike makes a spike of cold iron that impales something. As you might imagine, you won't like it if you don't like cold iron because it is a spike of cold iron. It might also immobilize them. But it might also immobilize them, and potentially if they critically fail, they might be flat-footed too.
Legit?
Yep. It's pretty solid.
Not very nice to Faye.
Then there's Imprint Message, which projects psychic vibrations onto the target. It's an object, and then that will make it so if anyone uses object reading, they can see those vibrations that you put in there. Indestructibility is a hilarious 10th level spell. Until the start of your next turn, you are immune to everything that would harm you, except effects caused by artifacts, deific power, and similarly powerful
It's basically
sources.
like, are you a god? No, then you're not going to do anything to me.
Hey, if someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes!
There we go.
Invisible item. Makes an item invisible. Maybe for the whole day. Maybe forever. Who knows? It
Very
just makes an item
convenient.
invisible.
Very convenient for if you want to smuggle something or otherwise conceal that you have it.
Yep.
Or make people think that you've already stolen the diamond.
That's right. But it's still there, and then they open up the defenses, and it's like, oh, now I'm stealing it.
Yep.
Lightning Storm is kind of like Ice Storm, except for with lightning. It does a huge amount of electricity damage in an incredibly tiny area. And by huge, I mean, like, it's not that huge, but it's huge considering that it's every round. But the area is very small, so it's hard to use it. It's like 2/3 of what a lightning bolt would do at that level, but every round. But it's hard to get a full lightning bolt or more value out of it because it's so small that someone probably wouldn't stay into it. But you could get 2. Mad Monkeys summons monkeys, and the monkeys either do flagrant burglary, a raucous din, or tumultuous gymnastics.
Yes. Well, for both Ice Storm and Lightning Storm 2, the idea of having a square that is just like nobody.
It's not just a square. It is
a
legitimately
5-foot burst,
a 5-foot burst, and that means that that means it's 4 squares and possibly 8 if you're outside. But. And, like, there are some situations when you're inside where 4 squares, like, choke up like a 10-foot wide hallway in such a way that it really, really...
So strategically positioning and basically making it so that, like, people just don't... You're basically deleting those squares from the battlefield. It's like, do you want to use these squares? Do you have to pass through these squares? I have bad news for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. No, you can.
Sorry, I just had a little...
Oh, no.
Oh no! I'll get back to
We're at the monkeys. They're either stealing or they're being loud
apparently.
or they're doing gymnastics around the area and messing up everyone's manipulate actions. So next is Magic Stone. It makes magic stones or sling bullets. They become magic and disrupting, and they do more damage and disrupt undead. Then there's Noxious Vapors. It's a first level spell that emanates out noxious vapors from you that deal poison damage to things and possibly sicken them if they critically fail. It also conceals for a very brief time. Then there's object reading, which
Make
we
sure
mentioned
your characters
before.
brush their teeth, so they're not accused of having that spell that they're casting. on
So
the pet.
imprint message makes a message to be seen with object reading. Object reading, which I think was picked up from an AP back matter, can let you know about an event that happened of the GM's choice of what event it is, based on you touch the object, and it could be up to forever for a 9th level version.
And I noticed that this isn't. Uncommon
It's
like
not.
some of the other divinatory things. In part because I imagine that the GM has a lot of flexibility in terms of what particular pieces of information that they're going to be giving you.
It's on the fence because we sometimes make things uncommon if it's like a pain because the GM has to come up with some emotional event that happened. Like, it could have been, but it isn't. Like, sometimes it's just like, this is hard for a GM to adjudicate and it takes skill. Like, because if you ask a newbie GM, quick! This shield I found, what was an emotional event that happened? Like, they might be, like, really put on the spot. But, it is common, so they will be put on the spot, and hopefully they'll think of something like, I only found it on that skeleton of adventure. You get a sense of this guy dying and trying to block with the shield, and it didn't work, and he's dead.
Yep.
You'll at least get something, hopefully. Alright. So next after that is pet cache. You cache your pet. So that can make a pocket dimension that your pet goes into the pocket dimension, and then you dismiss it, and your pet or die, your choice. I suggest dismissing
instead,
and
yes.
your pet comes out of the pocket dimension, or the duration can end too. Like it's fine.
Useful for keeping your animal companion or familiar safe from harm, and also smuggling them into places that wouldn't otherwise allow you to bring, say, a giant tiger into them.
You wouldn't let my giant tiger into the opera?
Well,
joke's on you.
Joke's on you.
When zombies came out in the opera, I took my tiger out of my pet cache. All it took was dying or spending one action. I chose the action. Alright, Phantasmal Treasure makes it a illusory treasure that's so awesome that people get fascinated by the treasure and potentially spend all of their actions trying to get the treasure. Only if they critically fail. Now, granted, since they are spending their actions trying to get the treasure, then they're going to be interacting with the treasure. So
they're gonna get another save, but it's a
Yes.
second
they're
level
gonna
spell.
they're gonna get another disbelief
Yeah.
every time because they're interacting with the treasure. But it's a second level non-incapacitation spell that until that continual interaction finally clicks them out of it, could make them lose the entire minute. Now, like statistically, no, they're not gonna fail like 30 checks, but it could make them lose an entire minute without being incapacitation. Pretty solid.
Legit.
Pummeling Rubble is a 15-foot cut of rubble that also pushes things away from you. That's earth. Quench is
In the theme of more water spells that are available for your character.
That's right. It's a water spell. It deals damage to fire creature. Bespoke damage, which then stacks with and combines with any weakness they have to water, of course. And then it also like counteracts magic fires and puts out fires. All sorts of these kind of quenchy things. And it deals... It's basically like a water ball. It deals more damage than fireball, but it literally only damages fire creatures.
It's also very useful for the surprisingly common situations in adventures where things catch on fire.
Yeah, no, it's the best one for that. Reaper's Lantern creates a ghostly lantern to guide the living towards death and the undead towards death. Everybody wants to be guided towards death when you're in the Reaper's Lantern. And basically, when living and undead creatures come in there, they're not going to heal. The living creature's not going to heal as much, and the undead creatures are going to be enfeebled because of the Reaper's Lantern, which is like pretty solid for second level spells. If you're going up against something with healing, you can cut off a huge percentage of their healing with this. They do get a save. And you can just keep spending actions to make the lantern bigger and bigger and bigger until suddenly it's so big that it's hard for them to be like, no, I have to get out of this thing before I heal myself or I get half the healing. Plus, having to get out of it to heal yourself is like a waste of your actions, and it makes healing less efficient. So
And also makes it harder to attack the caster of the spell.
Yep, absolutely. Then there's Rusting Grasp, where you touch something that is metal and it rusts. And it can do damage if it's a creature or hazard. If it's an item, it can do damage, but it's less because items don't usually have very many hit points. And then it can be heightened.
Speaking of being able to travel safely.
Well, yeah, safe passage.
Safe passage.
It basically, safe passage is like the one spell that's the opposite of the like 97 spells that create an area that's horrible that nobody wants to go into because it deals damage to them or is difficult terrain or like grabs them with vines or like swallows them into a pit or horrible fly traps like bite them or like there's an abyssal swamp in there or like fire comes down from the sky or comes up out of their feet or like bugs come to destroy them, and safe passage is like, no, in this area so you ignore the harmful effects from environmental damage and hazardous terrain, which there's some high-level hazardous terrain deals a massive amount of damage per square, and hazards, and
you gain a +2
you don't completely ignore them. You do only gain a resistance to them, and you gain a status bonus to AC
against them, and it prevents anything that's like if you see a bridge that is spanning a chasm and you're thinking, I'm playing a tabletop RPG. There is a 95% chance that this bridge is going to try to collapse. This specifically stops things that, like rickety bridges and unstable ceilings and things like that,
from collapsing unless someone puts enough strain to collapse a normal non-rickety version.
Yes.
That's correct. And it can be heightened to give 10 resistance, 15 resistance, and go up to 500 feet long, which is pretty handy, because at those high levels, when you have the 15 resistance, the things I was saying that were like, this is horrific, are sometimes like, you take 15 damage per square, and now you have to walk through 10 squares of this. It's like, well, that's 150 damage.
Yeah.
Or with this spell, it's none. So, like, it can be handy. And 500 feet's a lot. But it definitely has its uses. Scintillating Safeguard is another one of those reactions that you can... This one is a reaction that's, like, super trivial, because it's not even that they're attacking you. They're attacking, like, anything. Something attacks anything. That's going to happen.
Something attacks anything that happens to be within 30 feet of you.
And what it does is, the reason why it's a super trivial reaction is that it's a protection spell that is, like, a more expensive spell slot than Resist Energy, but you can do it reactively. So you're like, oh my gosh, whoosh, and then it protects 10 against that thing that
and it also doesn't just protect that one creature. If the triggering effect is an AoE, then you can protect it to 5.
Up to 5.
Yeah.
And then you can scale it up by 1. So it's like, yeah, you could have had resist 10, or like you could have almost had resist 15 to 3 creatures for like a significant duration of time with that spell slot, but a reaction is also useful because you know that it's going to happen. And
it's always going to be the right type of damage.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Sculpt sound is where you're like, I'm going to change the sounds to exactly what I want.
Appropriately occult for your bard friends.
Yep. You could obscure sounds. You can change it into, like, change something's voice or, like, make it so whenever someone steps around it makes, like, squeaking sounds. Like, whatever you're going to do, you can put in some sounds. Doesn't prevent somebody from using their verbal spell components, although it could cause it to sound really silly.
Mm-hmm. And it does mess with auditory effects if they rely on the other creature hearing accurately what's being said because
That's
of the
correct.
distortion. Yeah.
Because instead of them hearing your suggestions, like, I suggest you go leave this place and jump in a lake, and then they instead hear like,
yep.
Then
not gonna work.
It's not gonna work. So let's see. Seal Fate is where you seal someone's fate using necromancy, and you pick a death that is going to be the one that kills them, and in that case, they gain a weakness to that kind of thing. And if they are reduced to 0 hit points by the chosen type of damage and are low enough level, they instantly die. It's like, yes, mistletoe, your only weakness.
And if you heighten it, then you increase the level of the instant death, so you can keep this...
And the weakness.
Yes.
Secret Chest sends a chest into the ethereal plane, and where it's presumably safe, although it says, though it's very unlikely, it's possible for a creature on the ethereal plane to stumble onto the chest. And then you can call it back there. Spike stones is a good example of the type of thing that safe passage prevents you from taking damage from, because in theory, if you had to walk straight through a spike stones, it as a 4th level spell, it's going to deal 24 damage to you, or 0 if there's a safe passage through it. And it's difficult terrain, and it heightens to add damage at actually a faster rate than the initial damage, so... But even a 6th level spike stones, which would deal 40 damage if you walked straight from one end through the other and were forced to do so, safe passage is like 0. Yeah. So, Spirit Sense, you open your mind to the metaphysical and spirits and haunts, and this gives you a bonus to, like, kind of notice and interact with them, and also it, gives you a bonus to AC and saving throws against the haunts too. Plus, even if you're not searching, you can get a chance to find them because of your spirit sense. At 6th level, it can last the entire day.
Very useful for haunted places.
Strange geometry makes the geometry of 4 cubes not make any sense. So when you walk out of one of the cubes, you come out of like one of the other of the 4 cubes, and who knows which one. So it's like, but I walked right out of the cube that was in the, like, the east side of this, and now I'm on the west side. I just don't get it. That's how it goes. It's strange geometry. You do get a save because it's an illusion. And when you're interacting with it, you can wind up disbelieving it, and eventually you won't have to worry about the strange geometry.
But it can certainly mess up your enemies trying to move around the area and get to where they want to go.
Oh yeah, it's a pain. Because you're not going to want to go to one of the other 3 cubes. Like, that's just pretty much guaranteed. Sudden Blight just instantly deals negative damage to living creatures in the area.
Well, we said unsacred geometry, if you will. Yes, for sure.
It deals negative damage. -2 circumstance penalty if they have a disease, because you're kind of accelerating their disease. And you can also really do bad stuff to small and tiny non-creature plants, but not leshies.
Don't hurt the little leshies.
Summon Instrument creates a musical instrument. It's a cantrip.
Useful for bards. They're never without their instrument.
Yeah, they can get a virtuoso one eventually too. Thoughtful Gift is a 1st level conjuration teleportation spell. For 1 action, you just send an item from yourself to an ally. It's like, hey, I heard you need this item. Now you have this item. And at 5th level, you can send a heftier item. At 3rd level, it can be up to 500 feet. And at 5th level, you can do a 3-action version that goes up to a mile of sending the item.
So you can easily have the character with Thoughtful Gift carry all those things. It's like, okay, somebody's gonna need to use this potion or this thing. We don't know who's gonna need it. They hold it, and then they can make sure it makes it into the hands of whoever's gonna really need that powerful healing potion or whatever else you want for your group.
I mean, in theory, if you're a super high level group and you have like you're so high level that your 13th level like adjutant is much weaker than you, and you're like, hey, 13th level adjutant, you got all of these items, stay a mile away from us and just cast a bunch of these 5th level Thoughtful Gifts to send the items to the person who needs them when they need them. Because it's easier than us spending 1 action to draw the items out of our pocket.
Speaking of high level entitlement.
Hashtag high level problem.
Yes.
My 1 action is more valuable than your entire village's GDP.
Oh, high level PCs.
Threefold Aspect is a 3rd level spell that lasts for an entire day and lets you turn yourself into a child version of yourself, and an elderly version of yourself, and an adult version of yourself. And depending on which one you are, or like it's a young adult, but you know, depending on which one you are already, you turn into the other 2. And people who really know what you look like can tell that it looks like you, regardless of the age. But it definitely also is just like literally a young adult or an elderly person.
So if they don't know literally what you look like, it's really going to help your ability to disguise.
Yep. And if they don't specifically seek you, they won't be able to tell that, like, elderly isn't your true age. They don't get an automatic chance.
And if you're a young adult and they've heard you're a young adult, then they're not going to really think that this elderly person they come across is
Yep,
Is he-
unless they know you, then they still recognize you and can tell that the age is different.
It could
But
be
it-
useful for the it could be useful for like the situation where you get wanted posters of yourselves put up around town, and they've got like these sketches that you just don't look like that at all anymore.
That's right. Transmute rock to mud. It has actually been changed to transmute rock and mud so that we don't need 2 spells.
Yes.
You could turn rock to mud or mud to rock. When rock turns to mud, then it becomes very muddy and could become up to greater difficult terrain, which is a huge pain. It's a huge pain. And it can also be cast on the ceiling to do bludgeoning damage, which is literally a pain.
Yes.
A mud to rock can try to encase things in rock, and then they can be angry and have to try to escape from the rock. And then heightened can make more mud and more rock.
Legit.
We're almost done.
Vampiric Maiden.
We suddenly go from all these T's to like 2 V's and a W, but
There's
they're
a
real.
ghostly Iron Maiden.
They're like all really like hardcore.
Yeah.
At least 2 out of 3 of them are like Mikhail spells that have like these extra things. Like he also did the growth one, whereas like Jessica Catalan did Thoughtful Gift. I can't remember exactly who did everything, but I know that like Wall of Flesh and all the really gross ones are Mikhail. Vampiric Maiden is a ghostly Iron Maiden snapshot on the target and drains its vitality for your gain. So it deals piercing and negative damage. You gain temporary hit points equal to the negative part of the damage, and it might briefly immobilize them. They can, when they're immobilized for a round, they can just use an interact action to open it up. Except on a critical failure, when they're so trapped inside the Maiden that they actually have to use an escape DC, they can't just open it up and get out.
And if you heighten it up, then the damage increases.
Yeah, and the damage is already good enough that making them not able to move or have to spend an additional action and then an action to move, so they spend 2 actions to move with the failure, is already pretty good. Vomit Swarm, which we saw all the way in the intro, vomits out a swarm. It evokes out a swarm of vermin. It deals a pretty good amount of piercing damage that can also sicken anybody who fails.
Well, though, in that art we saw the very beginning of the swarm, because the swarm is actually a 30-foot cone.
It is. It's a pretty big cone. For a level 2 spell, that's a big cone, and it sickens also, which is a nasty condition because you have to spend actions to try to reduce the penalty, and it's a penalty to everything. And the action doesn't even guarantee to remove the penalty. Like, they still only get a save to try to remove it. And last, but certainly not least, Wall of Flesh. It makes a wall of living flesh that's covered in either mouths, eyes, or arms. And since it's made of living flesh, it can be healed by positive energy. The mouths on the wall will try to bite things, and they can drink potions if you need to feed them healing potions to heal the wall. The eyes can see things.
The eyes on the wall go round.
And you can see through the eyes and gain some bonuses to see through the wall. And the arms are going to try to grab things.
That spell is really creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. Classic Mikhail spell. So,
So that wraps up the standard spells, but we've also got some new focus spells.
You're right. We do, and rituals.
Yes.
So that is the last standard spell, but we've actually got focus spells and rituals. Let's get through those too.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to spend that much time on the focus spells because we talked about them from the feats that granted them.
That's true.
So we already said this before, but the Bard gets Hymn of Healing, which can heal things up. Ode to Ouroboros to prevent their allies from dying. Pied Piping, which forces enemies to like follow around after them, like the Pied Piper. Song of Marching to march for a long time. Song of Strength to be good at athletic stuff, and Symphony of the Unfettered Heart to remove a bunch of negative conditions like grabbed and immobilized.
I agree with Joe on the description of Wall of Flesh. The gropey, leery, eerie spell.
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
Champion has a bunch of evil stuff, like Litany of Depravity, which gives weakness to evil. It's the opposite of the Litany of Righteousness. Litany of Self-Interest, which makes someone so selfish that they gain a +2 bonus to attack rolls, perception checks, saving throws, and skill checks, but can't aid other creatures. Consider any creature an ally or use spells or abilities that directly benefit anyone else, even if they also benefit the target. And then it can be heightened to a +3 status bonus.
You're not casting 3-action heal if you've got that up.
Yep. Touch of Corruption is the opposite of Lay on Hands. It deals negative damage and gives a penalty to AC on a failed save. And it can give a +2 status bonus to damage rolls to an undead when it heals the undead. Then monks have, we talked about it in the monk, they have the Clinging Shadows stance, which is this negative damage and grapple-y stance. They've got Key Form, which is a focus spell with the power level of level 9. And they glow and their hair and feathers and skin change color, and they
can fly
around, and they have this
pretty fast movement speed.
A corona that deals damage automatically with no save to things that are next to them, and they are worse at emotion effects but better at other mental effects, and they also deal 1d6 additional damage and all sorts of things. It's Key Form.
It's the anime spell for like when the monk starts to glow with power and fly through the air and release their true potential.
Like it adds up eventually at those high levels. All of that extra damage.
I mean, fly speed equal to your. I had this on my on Petal Dancer, the 20th level monk that I was playing in the Q Time stream that came up for PaizoCon, and I really liked it because fly speed equal to your land speed is no joke when you're a monk. Like, seriously.
Yeah, and some creatures are weak to lawful damage. And if they aren't, you can use force for a negative. Medusa's Wrath is a petrifying key spell that is going to slow things down until they turn to stone, and Shadow's Web is the upgraded Clinging Shadow stance that could enfeeble and potentially stun and immobilize. So the oracles, we're really not going to get into because they are the basic spells for the mysteries, and we have not done class chat oracle, so I'm just going to skip it.
Sounds good.
And we'll do it in class chat oracle.
So we will reserve that for class chat oracle.
The sorcerer have all the things we talked about.
What about the ranger?
Oh. Yeah, I missed the ranger. The ranger had the things we talked about with ranger, which are those new warden spells, animal feature to gain an animal-based thing, enlarged companion, which buffs the size of your animal companion, ephemeral tracking to track like on water and air, gravity weapon to make extra damage on your first
it's
strike
not just
each
gravity
round.
bow anymore, it's gravity weapon.
Yeah, well, because it also has lead blades. Heal companion, which can heal hit points to your companion as a focus spell. Hunter's luck, where your recall knowledge is super lucky. Hunter's vision, where you get a make your target glow with a magic aura, which makes it easier to notice them, even if they would be invisible. Magic Hide, which gives some more AC to your companion. Ranger's Bramble, which can do a little entangling. Snare Hopping, when your snare's not in the right place and you want it to be in the right place. And Soothing Mist, which creates a mist that restores hit points and can end persistent damage just flat out. Plus Terrain Transposition, where you transpose your current location with another.
Useful for if you have favored terrain in particular.
Yes, you can bring your animal companion too, if you want. Sorcerer is all those bloodlines we talked about already. So, Blinding Beauty is from the Nymph bloodline and can dazzle and blind. Consuming Darkness is from the Shadow bloodline and can sort of sink things into shadow and slow them down and damage them. Dim the Light is a reaction that can basically cause you to flicker the ambient light level so that you immediately can hide whenever you do darkness and shadow spells. Establish ward,
which you definitely have, because that's your shtick.
Makes you have a ward like a nymph does in a certain area, so you can command the plants and the rocks and the winds and everything in there to attack. Genie's Veil is a reaction that has definitely, since we have a multi-class Genie Sorcerer in our Hell's Rebels game, it saved Linda against a Cerberus because it gives her, as a reaction, a 20% mischance for the entire turn of that creature. And it prevented 2 things over the course of double casting it when our Bard Sorcerer double casted on Linda over the course of 2 turns. So yay. Heart's Desire, you kind of give someone illusions of their Heart's Desire. It's another Genie one, and it gives some debuffs to them. Nymph's Token is a buff that lets you grant a token kind of like a nymph. Sepulchral Mask is a Psychopomp one that has a bunch of really good, like, little effects that really add up for a first level focus spell, where you get a bonus on will saves against emotion, and it can
The
do
enemies
mental
take
damage,
mental damage
every turn, and they also take a penalty to their saves against emotion if they fail their save. It's pretty handy. Shepherd of Souls is a Psychopomp one where you lose some hit points as a reaction, just as a sacrifice to protect your ally for double as much. Spirit Veil, another Psychopomp one where you can protect yourself, especially well from undead, from them being able to see you. Steal Shadow, you steal the shadow from someone, and they take negative damage and get enfeebled. I mean, why not steal someone's shadow?
Wish Twisted Form is the one we talked about more when we were focusing on the genie bloodline, where you can wish for your enemy's defenses to fail to turn their strengths into weaknesses and give them a lot of negative effects.
Even on a success, for 1 round they gain weakness 5 to 1 energy type of your choice, which you pick the one that's gonna work. Mm-hmm. Reduce all their resistances by 5. Give them a -10 to their speeds and a -1 to their saves. That's the successes that happens for 1 round. A failure is a minute. And a critical failure, they also lose some AC during that minute. It's pretty handy. Which we will come to when we do the Witch. And
Class Chat Witch, yes?
Yeah, Class Chat Witch. So that leaves us with the rituals. So there's some really good rituals in this book. There's not that many rituals, but they're pretty good ones.
Yeah, well, rituals take a lot of space to fully describe. So.
Oh, sure. But some of them are ones that you will know and love from before, and some of them are ones that you know and love from now.
Such as astral projection,
where you project yourself and up to 5 creatures onto the astral plane, and you guys are like in suspended animation, except can be killed by somebody on the physical plane, while your astral projections go and have some kind of an adventure on the astral plane. Then there's clone, where you grow a clone in a vat, and it's ready to pick up when the previous person dies. Although, of course, on a critical failure, the clone is actually super evil instead. So, whoops. Why'd you do that? Create demi-plane. You create a demi-plane, and that's pretty handy. Everyone likes to create
your own personal demi-plane, and you get to make a lot of choices about the ecosystem and its elemental alignments.
And you can add some special effects to it by casting it again. That's what some of those alignments and gravity things do. And if it's heightened to 10th, then it's really big. Oh my gosh. Because it's not that big at the 8th level version, but the 10th one is really big. It's really expensive, but it is proportionally saving you money if you were going to cast it that many times to get the 10th level version size out of the 8th level version. Mm-hmm. You save a lot of money by doing the 10th level version, I think. But it's also a lot of money.
That's true.
But you got a demi-plane. Fantastic Facade is where you, also very expensive, but you permanently make an entire settlement have, like, this ridiculous illusion over it, so you could make it look like every day is Day of the Dead and everybody's skeletons, but they're not, just everybody's skeletons. Or you could make it look like there's just a daily parade that doesn't actually happen.
You can make it look like it talks about an illusory forest, make everything look green, make
a ruins look like an active town.
You can create a bunch of illusory defenses for your town so that you don't have to worry about building like walls and things like that. You can have people, or concealing. Yeah, I mean you can change pretty much anything. You can.
It's up to a 1 mile radius.
Yeah.
But you can get a 5 mile radius for the 10th level version.
The settlement looks like whatever you want. Can you do the reverse? Can you make it look like it's not defended and dilapidated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever. It can look like a forest that's not defended as a forest. It can be what you want it to be. It's a ridiculous illusion. Alright. So, Heart Bond. That is a spell that is often used in marriage ceremonies. It's not, like, literally exactly a guaranteed marriage. You can do it with friends, too. But it allows you to... You have to actually have some degree of actual connection to the other person, of affection with them, such as friendship or the desire for a marriage, and it can allow you to basically kind of know where the other person is and what conditions are affecting them. And if you critically succeed, you can do messages to each other.
This ritual was featured in a really sweet blog.
Yes, there's art of it too.
Where there's art of.
Are you even on the page of Heartbond? Because
no,
there it is.
One page behind. Yes, there we go. A blog that talked about Kyra and Merciel's wedding, which you can see on Paizo.com.
That's right. Hero's Feast. You conjure otherworldly beings to serve you a feast. They may be fey or divine or something, and it can be really good and remove poisons and diseases and fear and give you 100 hit points back and a bunch of temporary hit points and status bonuses. Maybe only 50 hit points and 10 temporary hit points if you don't critically succeed. But also, you could offend the hosts who come and cause them to be very angry and sicken you with food poisoning.
You can't remove for 12 hours.
Correct.
Sicken 4.
Yep.
So don't offend your otherworldly host.
Thanks for the
sub,
subscription, Nitrace. Yep. Don't offend your otherworldly hosts is just, like, that's usually good advice, whether or not you cast Hero's Feast, but it's particularly a good advice with Hero's Feast, since you know you're going to eat that food. So, reincarnate brings someone back from the dead, but into a new body that is some other random thing. It's a 1 in 14 chance to be a common ancestry, a 15 to 20 chance of an uncommon or rare ancestry. The GM chooses possible ancestries based on those found in the region. It rolls randomly between them.
So, for example, for the common ancestry, you could roll a d6 to choose from the core rulebook.
If they would like to.
Yeah.
And they replace their ancestry hit points, size, speed, ability boost, ability flaws, traits, and special abilities with the new ones. Rest Eternal is a spell for when you don't want something to be brought back or turned into an undead. You sequester their spirit to the afterlife. Also makes it harder to call the spirit back to communicate with it. Excuse me.
Bless you.
So they kind of have to counteract your Rest Eternal first before they want to do anything else. And furthermore, they have to be at least 2 levels higher. So Rest Eternal is even a little better than that.
Well, that makes sense because it's specialized to be like, yes, don't do this.
They don't actually. That's the critical success.
Yeah.
The regular success is they have to be higher level than you or originate from an artifact or a deity. And critical success is 2 levels higher or artifact or deity. So basically, they have to be something that is so much higher level that it would counteract you on a failure if they want to get past it.
How about Simulacrum, the spell whose first edition version was so complicated it was the topic of, was it our very first episode of our
Yes, it was. It was our very first episode. It was an entire episode. It's
so
much
this
simpler.
time around is much simpler, so that you don't need an entire episode dedicated to how it works.
It's not trying to actually, like, reproduce some unspecified half version of a creature. It goes back to its roots, took a lot of workshopping, and I talked it through, and, like, Logan gave a lot of feedback. He's like, what is this really trying to do, though? And you're making something that kind of looks like the creature, but is really mostly like an illusory fraud that looks like them, but does not have all of their abilities. And so, it's very basic. It looks a lot like them. And it even has illusions that look like it can use its abilities, but it can't really use the abilities. Like, it can do a breath attack, but it just seems like everybody critically succeeded at their saves, because it doesn't actually have a breath attack. And it has some basic abilities of a 4th level creature that has the moderate numbers for a monster from Game Mastery Guide. Except, its deception to impersonate that creature is outstanding. It's as good as whoever rolled the secondary check on deception.
Plus an additional +4 status.
Plus an additional +4. And that person rolling the secondary check could be ridiculously good. So, it's like very, very hard to tell that it's a fake. But eventually you can. And the deception DC is what determines if they can disbelieve. So that's even harder to disbelieve it. Also, a critical failure, the Simulacrum is hostile to you and wants to destroy you. But of course,
if it can't kill you, which it probably can't.
It probably can't because it's a 4th level thing.
Then it runs away to try to plot your demise. So you might see it having gathered allies against you.
That's right. Teleportation circle makes a circle that teleports to another teleportation circle within 1,000 miles. That you also need the secondary caster to be on the other side of the circle. Or
It normally goes in one direction, but
oh
you
right,
can
right,
double
right.
the cost
If you
to make
want
a
a double
bi-directional
direction,
one.
that's
yeah.
what it is.
Mhm.
That's what I was thinking. You can do one direction, or you can do bi-directional by bringing somebody to the other side. It's handy. Also, let me see. It's if you bring the person to the other side and they succeed at their secondary check, you get a critical success if you succeed. So that is, even if you don't want the bidirectional version, actually,
it's definitely worth it because you want to, because a critical success in the teleportation circle makes your destination completely accurate.
yes.
As opposed to being off by roughly 1% of the distance
Which
traveled.
is not good because at least everyone goes together to be off by 1%, but
Yes.
it's not where you wanted it to be. It's probably okay. So it's really worth it to send someone to the other side. Even
If you
want...
heighten it up to 10th level, then you can have an unlimited duration anywhere on the same planet.
Yeah, super handy. You really want that to go to the right place, though.
Yes, because if that's off by...
Then for an unlimited duration, everyone's going to be
then...
like, well, we've named this teleportation circle Linda's Slightly Inaccurate Circle. It tries to take you to Absalom and accidentally takes you to this harpy-infested place that's in the Kortos Mountains, but it's close to Absalom.
But at least it brought you to the Isle of Kortos, so maybe it brought you into the water nearby. Hey, at least it's... Or at least it brought you from Tian Sha to somewhere vaguely near Absalom.
Oh, well, in that case, being off by 1%, it probably sent you not even on the Isle of Kortos.
Yes. That's
It's
what I was
like,
saying, maybe you're in the water.
It's like, well, we're on the coast of Qadira. That's sounds bad, given that we're trying to go to Absalom
but
or
it's
something
much
like
better
that. But
than
it's
literally
much
landing
closer.
in the
It's
Inner
much closer than Nangajor.
Yes.
Oh
wow.
Okay.
What about Unseen Custodians?
So Unseen Custodians is actually like an idea from playtesters and like the forums, which is like the idea was that yes, obviously first edition's 24-hour long Unseen Servants that you don't do anything about is like not really something that is a low-level spell, a like regular spell in Pathfinder 2nd edition, where you just like don't pay attention, don't sustain it, and they're just there. But it could be a ritual, because some people just want an area where they've got servants that are going around doing stuff.
And this has a much greater duration too.
Yeah, it's a year. So it's a year, it's really not that expensive, and it gives you a site-bound, long-lasting Unseen Servant that creates 6 servants. You don't have to concentrate on them, they aren't summon minions. You can spend an action to give them a task, and they will keep doing that task. On a critical success, you get 3 on a success, none on a failure. On a critical failure, there are 6 of them, but they hate you, and they try to destroy you.
Try not to critically fail at your rituals is generally
Yep.
Speaking
Ward
of
domain.
What you might do in your domain.
That's similar to like guards and wards. It has the ability to like cause Linda to get distracted and draw a giant map of a very small area.
Yeah, well, I didn't know guards and wards was a thing. I thought it was a puzzle that I was supposed to solve, and I had a massive... I think we still have that massive map somewhere.
Yep.
From one of my first
It was
sessions.
a map of an area that was basically like a 3x3 grid of places you could go to, all of which had intersections that would randomly send you somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a sprawling complex in... and Linda's like, well, I see the stairs again going up, but I want to make sure I have this floor completely mapped before I go up a level, because that it's just gonna be confusing otherwise. So I'll go back again to the intersection.
Yeah, and like of course because of just randomness, there seemed to be some patterns that I was deducing which were just completely random, and I was very confused.
It's like, oh, I went back from the stairs again, and this time I found the one that had the web in it.
I appreciate the players who had experience with the game and knew it was probably Guards and Wards, letting me experience Guards and Wards as a new player, as opposed to correcting me. It was a lot of fun.
So it locks every gate, door, and window with a lock spell.
Perhaps a more accurate depiction of how people might react at first when they see this, if they're not like, oh yes, I know metagaming.
This doesn't do like quite the ridiculous amount of Guards and Wards. It's kind of more typical, because like Guards and Wards had some stuff like webbing things. It's like, do you always really want to web the thing that you're warding? So this is locking your doors. 6 of your doors or like doorways or hallways or something like that get illusorily disguised so people can't see them. Scrying spells can't perceive anything from the area. That's a useful one. And it tries to counteract teleportation effects into or out of the area, including attempts to summon creatures into the area.
Well, there is a way to get traps in your ward domain if you critically fail and it becomes trapped and hostile to you and your allies in ways you didn't anticipate.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And you can heighten it to make it bigger. And then finally, for this entire chapter and episode, Word of Recall, where you bind a kind of a safe recall place for your town portal scroll when you do the ritual, and then at some point, at some time, somebody utters the word, "Oh crap!" and then at that point, anyone else who was part of the ritual who wants to,
yes,
can come along and the spell ends. If someone's like, "No, I want to stay where I am," it's like, well, okay, but you're not coming back with Word of Recall later. So make sure you don't bring someone into your Word of Recall who always jumps the gun. Who's that person who's like, "Oh no, we took some damage. I'm gonna use Word of Recall."
No, wait.
That's 5,000 gold pieces.
Mm-hmm.
We could have waited for a more desperate situation. Also, on a critical failure, the ritual inadvertently forms a connection with a location on another plane, and you are unaware that it did that, and when you try to recall to a safe place, you wind up in, like, the abyss.
Yeah. Hold on. We forgot something?
No, wait, Luis. We didn't forget that they covered the Deja Vu spell. If you go back in time, you'll see that I covered it, and then after I finished about 3 more spells, I covered it again.
With the Deja Vu spell, you loop the thought process in the target now. Alright, everybody.
Alright, so...
I think it's time to say goodbye to YouTube.
Bye, YouTube!
Bye! Thanks for joining us.